Hello, I'm Charles Kovess, Australasia's passion provocateur. Welcome to this week's episode of the Charles Kovess Show. This show is guided by the formula SA plus P equals S. Self-awareness plus passion equals success. Now, I'm conscious that I haven't been talking about what is success. I'm going to give you a definition of success, the best one that I've heard. I've looked at many definitions of success, and so for the purposes of this show and this formula, I learned this definition, this quote from Earl Nightingale's famous recording in the 1950s of The Stranger's Secret. Success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. I am successful when I am progressively realizing a worthy ideal. You are successful when you are realizing a worthy ideal. So it begs the question, what is a worthy ideal? In earlier episodes I have touched on that, and I will touch on it again later in this episode. This show is also guided by Socrates' famous quote, "The unexamined life is not worth living." For 27 years, since 1993, I've been working with groups, with individuals, helping them to understand the wonderful power that we have inside us. And Tony Robbins, of whom I'm a great fan, his signature program is called Unleash the Power Within. I have always understood that unleashing this passion makes you incredibly powerful, makes you able to achieve your dream, makes you able to pursue your worthy ideal. So I'm wearing my red jacket to remind you of passion. Every time you see red, I want to install this idea into you that it's a reminder to you, am I pursuing my passion? Have I discovered my passion? Each week, I want to share with you one big idea, and I want to share with you a series of resources that will help you pursue that one idea. This is not politically correct, this show. This show is underlined by spirituality, our human spirit. It's what makes us human. Well, in Melbourne today, it's the 5th of July, but as we're recording the show, it's the 4th of July. And the 4th of July, of course, is the day that America celebrates its Declaration of Independence 244 years ago. And that Declaration of Independence I consider to be a remarkably important factor in human history. In my book, Passionate Performance, my second book, I talk about the Declaration of Independence, and I want to read to you from that book to help you understand why that Declaration of Independence is so important and why it was so risky to make that Declaration of Independence. So, Passionate Performance, this is going to be the book of the week. If you haven't already invested in it, it's worthwhile. A message of mastery in a changing world. After the Continental Congress on July 2, 1776 voted to declare independence and set in motion those events Americans celebrate on 4 July each year, John Adams wrote an inspirational letter to his wife Abigail that pointed to the potential and the cost of radical change. He wrote, "The Declaration of Independence ought to be commemorated as the day of deliverance by solemn acts of devotion to God Almighty. It ought to be solemnized with pomp, shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations, from one end of the continent to the other, from this time forward forever. You will think me transported with enthusiasm, but I am not. I am well aware of the toil and blood and treasure that it will cost us to maintain this declaration and support and defend these states. Yet through all the gloom, I can see the rays of light and glory. I can see that the end is more than worth all the means, and that posterity will triumph. The cost for those change agents was high. 5 signatories of the 56 were captured by the British as traitors. And you need to remember that signing this Declaration of Independence was a treasonous act. You were a traitor. 5 were captured by the British as traitors and tortured before they died. 12 had their homes ransacked and burned. 2 lost their sons, serving in the Revolutionary Army. Another had 2 sons captured. 9 of the 56 fought and died from wounds or hardships of the Revolutionary War against England. You know, the 1776, the King of England, like this was the most powerful force on the planet, and this was a revolution. This was an impossible dream. They signed and they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honour. They had the vision, the values, and the resolve to see their change through. Remember, the Revolutionary War happened after the Declaration of Independence. Americans continue to honour these original signatories. Can we learn from them? What values guide your changes? What costs are you willing to pay for what you value? What assets will you invest? Do you have the enthusiasm for the destination to sustain the journey to get there? Thankfully they did. And much of this was a quote or a piece that I put into my book. I was so moved by it because independence and freedom is what, as human beings, we yearn for. And July 4 is this remembrance, 244 years of it. And there's some interesting stuff happening in the world where America, that is said to be the land of the free and the brave, there are forces at play to stop Americans having freedom of thought. To not be brave, to be fearful at a time of coronavirus, to be fearful. Listen to us, the government, to have lockdowns. And it's also happening in Victoria. Our Victorian government is performing abysmally and is now locking down certain suburbs of Victoria. And Victoria is becoming a laughingstock of the rest of Australia. But over the course of the last week, I still haven't seen anything that justifies the giving away of freedom, the willingness to be locked down. Like, just contemplate this idea that this coronavirus is deadly, has proven to be a nonsense. It is only deadly for a tiny, tiny percentage of the population. And again, I say, the numbers that you are being fed, that so many people have died from coronavirus, it's not true. So, on the 4th of July, I remind you of the value of fighting for your independence of thought, for your freedom to say what you believe, not what is going to be politically accepted. For example, I say that all lives matter. I say again, it's a nonsense that if I say all lives matter, that's being racist in the context of Black Lives Matter. There are lies being published in the mainstream media that there are peaceful protests going on when clearly they're violent riots. So, are you maintaining your freedom of thought, and are you willing to fight for what is important for you? Are you willing to put your physical body, your life, on the line for it? Are you willing to invest your assets as the piece goes, as those 56 signatories risked everything to sign that Declaration of Independence? Thomas Jefferson was one of the authors of that Declaration of Independence, and when you look at the history of the actual words that were put in there, It's a very convoluted process. I didn't stream it off and that was the words. No, there was deep, deep thought and debate and conversation about what those words mean. And words have meaning. The words that we use have meaning. And the words that you use in your life has meaning. So that's part of the review of the week, but this is a crucial time in humanity to remember the importance of our humanity, our independence, our freedom. Now, for the idea of the week. The idea of the week is to encourage you to choose wisely from all of the choices available to you. So here we are, episode 15 of the Charles Scoville Show. I have shared with you 14 big ideas from these 14 shows. You know, like, if you go back and think about, gosh, what are those 14 ideas? What am I going to do? My proposition to you today is, which of the ideas that you've had from these shows are of value and importance to you? And when I say choose wisely, it ties into your self-awareness, because wisdom is for you to make the right decision compared to the wrong decision, a good decision rather than a bad decision. Not every one of the ideas I share with you is particularly relevant to you. You see, there are so many choices we can make, but you can't choose everything. Peter Drucker famously says the essence of strategy is the ability to say no. So what are you going to say no to? So I thought today, in episode 15, I would do a quick review of the 14 episodes to give you a basis on which you can think about what this show is trying to help you to more deeply understand. And each 1% step in progress that we make helps us feel good. Tony Robbins famously says, we feel happy when we are progressing. And my wish for you is that you feel successful and happy. And indeed, when I say, well, what do you want? All of the things that we want because it's going to give us certain feelings. It's going to make us feel good about life. My wish for you is that you feel good about life. Every day that you feel good about life. So, the 14 principles that we've talked about, the 14 big ideas, tie into this idea of every day when you wake up, you feel good. You feel you are on purpose. You feel that your life has meaning. You don't say, what's the point? No, you know what the point is. The point is the purpose that you've adopted. So, in episode 1, I talked about understanding passion. Then in episode 2, so passion is a source of energy. And if you don't know what it is, well, your job is to find it. And of these 14 lessons, 2 or 3 are particularly relevant to you. So choose wisely of these 14. So episode 2 was benefits and drawbacks. Every experience that we have has benefits and drawbacks. If you lose all your money, it has benefits and drawbacks. If you win Tats Lotto, it has benefits and drawbacks. Stop thinking that you can make a choice that doesn't have drawbacks. Once you understand that, choices become more easily where you make a choice, not on the basis of avoiding drawbacks, but on making a choice consistent with what your purpose in your life is. Episode 3 talked about freedom. As I have today with the July 4 celebrations, I say without freedom, we are just like animals. In episode 4, I talked about responsibility. You are responsible for your life. And the whole Black Lives Matter movement, and then in Australia on the question of Aborigines, I say that if you act like a victim and if you treat people like victims, that totally disempowers them. And a number of Australian Aboriginal leaders have come out and said the problem with many Australian Aborigines is they play the victim game. Give us money, give us compensation. I reject that model. That is no way for you to develop as a human being. You must learn to take responsibility. I say that I'm responsible for the future of humanity in episode 4. Are you willing to take responsibility? The signatories to the Declaration of Independence in 1776 were certainly willing to take responsibility. Episode 5 talked about your problems. Your reward for solving problems is bigger problems. If you spend your life avoiding problems, you will not progress. And it's progress that makes us happy. So if you're avoiding problems, you're not going to be very happy. Episode 6 challenged you with the question of what is your purpose on this planet? And remember, passion is a clue to your purpose. What is your purpose on planet Earth? Of course, for some people, maybe your sole purpose in life is to serve as a warning to others. That was a bit of a light-hearted joke. Episode 7 was inviting you to contemplate the basis on which you make your decisions, coming from love or from fear. Love comes from your spirit, fear comes from your mind. Episode 8, we talked about regeneration. In changing times, we have to be willing to keep regenerating. If you do sacrifice all of your assets in a cause, good, you have to regenerate. You have to rebuild. We build up assets so that we can live off them in changing times. We need to regenerate. If your thinking is mired in the past, you need to regenerate. Episode 9, I reminded you how you're a weirdo and why you are a weirdo. And to some degree, how it's almost a fluke that somebody agrees with you. Each one of us is a weirdo. When you understand that, it liberates you more to be true to yourself and embrace the idea that people criticize you for being a weirdo. You go, terrific, I'm a weirdo. You are then giving yourself the permission to live your life as you want to live it, not according to someone else's rules. Episode 10 talked about the fine line between pleasure and pain. And it's your mind that determines whether something is pleasure or pain. Very, physical pain when I'm riding hard on my bike, that's pain. But there's great pleasure afterwards. 1 hour of hard exercise, 1 hour of hard pain gives me 23 hours of pleasure in the rest of my life, each day. Episode 11, I talked about the 2 crucial factors that build world-class teams, trust and caring. Although if you're a bit scarier, you might go into trust and love. If you trust your teammates and you love them, you become capable of achieving world-class results. Episode 12, we talked about wisdom. We talked about your philosophy. I shared the idea, in fact, almost the truth, that philosophy is the love of wisdom. I urged you to become wise, and this episode is about choosing wisely. Episode 13 was exploring your beliefs. Our beliefs are wonderfully powerful resources and shockingly limiting upon our achievements. What beliefs do you have that limit where you want to go? What beliefs stop you from doing what you truly want to do? Are you even aware of what those beliefs are? And then episode 14, last week I talked about the essential scary steps for your skill development. The willingness to make mistakes. If you're not willing to make mistakes, you can't progress. It is not possible to progress. The only way you develop any skill is through making mistakes. And so again, this ties into your philosophy. You embrace this as part of your philosophy. Yes, I'm scared of making mistakes. I don't want to be scared of making mistakes. And for me, you might say, that is the issue that lies at the heart of my next step in my progression. Why aren't I doing what I want to do? So choosing wisely, sometimes the answer is obvious. And so this self-awareness then says, gosh, of these changes in thinking, how am I going to keep repeating these new ideas? Because if I hear them once and they're not repeated, then I forget them. I therefore, in my own life, I write copious notes. I write down what I want to think. I write down what I want my new beliefs to be. Perhaps the answer is obvious to you. And perhaps sometimes we don't look at the obvious answers. We look at some complex answers. Maybe you might have friends who can give you the obvious answer. It reminds me of the story of Sherlock Holmes and Watson. They were out camping in the hills of England. And it was 3 a.m. in the morning, and Watson and Sherlock woke Watson and said, "Watson, open your eyes." And Watson does. And Sherlock says to him, "Watson, what can you see?" And Watson goes, "I see stars, Sherlock." And Sherlock goes, "What does that mean to you, Watson?" And Watson, knowing how deep a thinker Sherlock was, he thinks hard, and he says, "Well, Sherlock, astronomically, I can see millions of stars, and it shows to me how big the universe is, and theologically, this shows to me how amazing God is to have created this, and meteorologically, I reckon it's going to be a beautiful day tomorrow, and horologically, I think it's about 3:30 in the morning, and astrologically, I determine that Saturn is in Leo. That's what it means to me. Why, Sherlock? What does it mean to you?" Sherlock goes, "Watson, you dickhead, somebody's stolen our tent." I love that joke. Is the answer obvious for you? Or is the answer hidden? My song for you this week, and before I share some more resources for you, I invite you to subscribe to this podcast, or if you're on the YouTube, to this YouTube channel. I also invite you to come and visit our 2 websites, coves.com for corporate programs, for public programs. You can buy our books, Passionate People Produce, Passionate Performance, lots of other resources, and charlescoves.com, where we have details of the Self-Awareness and Passion Quest, which is a special online coaching program that will help you identify what you need to do to take your next steps, to help you choose wisely. Please go and visit those sites. Subscribe to Passion Points to Ponder. Now, the song of the week. I love it. I love it. It really moves me when I hear this song. To dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe, to bear with unbearable sorrow, to run where the brave dare not go. This is my quest, to follow that star, no matter how hopeless, no matter how far, to fight for the right without question or pause, to be willing to march into hell for a heavenly cause. That's what the signatories did when they signed that Declaration of Independence, to fight that revolutionary war. And I know if I'll only be true to this glorious quest, that my heart will lay peaceful and calm when I'm laid to my rest. And here's the last verse. And the world will be better for this, that one man, scorned and covered with scars, still strove with his last ounce of courage to fight the unbeatable foe, to reach the unreachable star. I find that very inspiring. I find, in fact, that it is the fight that you want to fight with courage that forces you to grow. Doesn't matter, you might think you might not achieve it, but you are driven by your values to fight for what you believe in. If you're going to fight the unbeatable foe, then being healthy is a pretty useful thing to have. And I thought I had mentioned this in one of my earlier episodes, but I urge you to think about what health is. I'm going to give you a health tip. Now, most people that I talk to don't have a definition of health. They don't understand what health is. And with my parents coming from Hungary, and I speak fluent Hungarian, I'm president of the Australia-Hungary Chamber of Commerce, the Hungarian language is very precise. And the Hungarian word for health, which I have adopted as my definition of health, is egészség. It means wholeness, being whole. And so my definition of health for you to contemplate is that health is the unique, optimal balance for you of mental, physical, and spiritual elements. If you're out of balance mentally or physically or spiritually, you wouldn't consider yourself to be healthy. So adopt this Hungarian word, egészség, E-G-E-S-Z-S-E-G. Wonderful word. I think about it all the time. My spiritual tip for you this week is coming from your heart, caring for human beings, loving other human beings. If you want a deep heart-to-heart connection, then please contemplate the formula V plus V equals I. When vulnerability meets vulnerability, you get intimacy. When you are vulnerable and another human being is vulnerable, you reach this state of intimacy. You reach a spiritual connection. And so I urge you to think about the risks of being vulnerable and the rewards for being vulnerable, so that you connect deeply at a spiritual level with human beings with whom you wish to connect. And one of the vulnerabilities that you can practice is to speak your truth. If you are a leader, and as a parent of 5 children, I am a leader of children, albeit some of them are adults. If you want a deeper connection with your child, then my suggestion is choose to be vulnerable about what worries you, about your journey. And your vulnerability as a leader then gives permission to the person or people whom you are leading to be vulnerable themselves. And you build a spiritual intimacy. It's a very powerful resource in the relationship between human beings. My book of the week is Passionate Performance. So you might have passionate people produce, but Passionate Performance is more like a guidebook to put into practice some of the ideas, many of the ideas in Passionate People Produce, and how to have mental, physical and spiritual well-being in business. I have shared these ideas with 35 of Australia's 350 largest organisations. I know it works, because guess what? The leaders of the biggest organisations in Australia, in America, in the whole planet are human beings who have mental, physical and spiritual elements. Well, that's it for the show. I hope it's been useful for you. I hope I've provoked some ideas for you. I hope I haven't upset you too much, but if I have, then look at your upset, because you are responsible for whenever you're upset. Don't forget to visit our websites, subscribe to the YouTube channel, to the podcast, and I hope for the next 7 days you have a magnificent week full of challenge, progress, fun, learning, and embracing the problems that come about, because you are getting ever better at solving problems so that you keep being rewarded with bigger problems. And with a philosophy that you've developed in such a way that regardless of your problems, when you wake up every day, you go, woohoo, here I am. I'm here to fight the impossible fight, to dream the impossible dream. Thanks for being with us. I look forward to being with you next week.